So the man that you see here was charged with terrorism because of a drawing on a chewing gum wrapper. I'm not making that up. I want to tell his story. This was in Kharkive Human Rights Protection Group. That's the organization that published this. And I highlighted it extensively, and I want to just walk through this. And I want to tell his story because when you hear an individual story, it has a different effect on you than when you just hear X number of thousands of people had something happen to them. So we're going to talk about Anatoli Leiko. Leiko is a well-known theater director in Mariupol. On 22 May, the occupiers arrested him for his pro-Ukrainian views. The man was accused of inciting hatred, extremism, and terrorism, and even calling for the Kremlin arson because he posted on Facebook a chewing gum wrapper that said, "Love is." And let's look at what this chewing gum wrapper, this offensive chewing gum wrapper looked at. But we're going to look at his story first and what he went through. He said, "My family at this time consisted of me, my wife, a 92-year-old mother-in-law, and a disabled son. Artem is 21 years old and nonverbal autistic." Subsequently, another problem arose, and now they're in Mariupol, they're being occupied, and so this is what's happening as Mariupol is being invaded, occupied, overrun by the Russians. Subsequently, another problem arose, a shortage of food and water. I had to spend a lot of time searching. We were lucky because there was a large store nearby where we found a lot of wooden pallets. We took them apart and burned them. Okay, so it's creative. We didn't go to the bomb shelter because we lived on the 9th floor. The elevator didn't work and our basement was too deep. There's a staircase about 5 meters down there and you had to jump. My mother-in-law and son would not have been able to climb there. So they're in danger, but they can't really do much about it. I saw a tricolored tank shooting at houses. In mid-March, the occupiers entered. One of the occupiers constantly emphasized, "I am, by the way, from Moscow." And then he got pretty drunk on vodka and said, "They didn't take me into the army because at the trial the prosecutor said that I was a maniac." What we understood from that was that he was serving a sentence for sexual assault. Well, that's charming. We have elevators and trolley buses running here, but ashes. That's what they were reduced to. 20 May, I was arrested. When fighting moved closer to Azovstal, I began to look for a way to leave. To get through the checkpoints, you had to go through a filtration procedure. On 17 May, my family and I went through filtration, but on 20 May, I was arrested and a criminal case was opened against me. Charges were brought against me for several posts on Facebook, which they interpreted as extremism, incitement to terrorism, inflaming national and other hatred. Well, how bad is this guy? My wife went grocery shopping that morning and I was at home. Someone knocked. Two guys, 20 to 25 years old, stood behind the door. One of them put a gun to my stomach and started shouting something. They immediately began a search, unpacking everything in the apartment and taking away the phone. I asked them to wait until my wife came and not to leave Artem alone. That's his autistic adult but autistic son. But they didn't allow it. I had to ask my neighbor to sit with him. They pulled an ordinary plastic bag over my head. Then there was another interrogation. They talked to me as if I was an officer of the Third Reich. "Your nationalist beliefs. We will show you a statement of cooperation with the SBU." What? I mean, he's just a theater director in Mariupol. Around 1 a.m., I found myself in the infamous isolation. The guards beat people. However, I was lucky. A kick in the back a couple of times doesn't really count. We could be punished for any offense. When the door cell opens, everyone must turn their backs and put bags over their heads. The guards were afraid that you would see them and remember them. That's a really telling statement. That you'd see them and remember them, and then after the war, there will be retribution. And there will be retribution after the war. I see Ukraine taking more of a Israeli-like, we will prosecute everyone, we will come after everyone kind of policy. So it's coming. Each of the prisoners dreams of taking revenge on them if he survives. There were no transfers from the outside. All of the time in isolation, I didn't even know if my family knew where I was or what was wrong with me. Well, what was he even arrested for? The examination found that I called for the Kremlin arson. What? Called for Kremlin arson. On 16 June 2022, I was introduced to the investigator. This vast prison, built in the 50s of the last century, looked like a prison from Stalin's times. Well, news for you, it has become more Stalin-like, and that's what's going on there. It's not re-Sovietizing in the sense of trying to be Marxist or communist, but re-Sovietizing in the authoritarian sense, for sure. Until October, I was in a cell of 4. It's the size of a train compartment. Inside is a bucket, a wash basin, and a small table for eating. If 2 people stand up, the other 2 must lie down because there's no more room. Of my 3 neighbors, 2 were murderers. There were terrible unsanitary conditions and bedbugs. In October, I was transferred to political criminals. There were cockroaches and rats there. There was a shower once a week with ice-cold water. In the first cell with 25 places, 29 people had to take turns sleeping. Subsequently, I was transferred to the next cell where there were 18 places for 21 people. I slept again every other night. Great conditions. On June 16th, I was charged under Article 328 of their code for inciting hatred. All accusations were based on denunciations and posts from my social networks. That's what got them in trouble. In October, they opened cases under 2 more articles, incitement to extremism and terrorism. And they found a post on Facebook with a picture of a love is ... chewing gum wrapper. That's it, a picture of a chewing gum wrapper with a drawing on it. Let's see that in just a moment. A boy and a girl sit there holding hands and looking at the burning Kremlin. Below is the caption, "Love is when you look in the same direction." The examination established that in this way, I called for the Kremlin arson. He wasn't going to do anything about Kremlin arson. He wasn't trying to do Kremlin arson, but that's what he was charged with. So it's interesting, when you're not afraid of things, you don't have to clamp down on freedom of speech. You don't have to. You can let people have their opinion or say things or what, but when you are afraid of what they might do or say, then you have to squash it. And that's what Russia's been doing. The examination established that in this way I called for Kremlin arson. The 3 cases together could result in a 7 to 9 year sentence. So that's what happened to this man. 7 to 9 year potential sentence for those 3 cases. Now, he's subsequently been released under his own recognizance, and part of that is because there was a transfer from DPR laws to Russian laws in the meantime, and so things changed, and they're trying to figure out how to prosecute him exactly, but they released him in the time being. But for a chewing gum wrapper, this man has endured all that. It's almost a metaphor alert for everything else that's happened in Russia or in Ukraine since the invasion, but as well as in Russia, because in Russia, they've lost their freedoms too. I mean, they've lost, like, people held up a blank sign and gone to jail for that. So, so I wanted to tell the story because it's just been bothering me. And it's been bothering me kind of in a good way, in a sense that, like, I can't shake it. I can't let this out of my psyche. And this was something from early November, I think the 2nd of November, and it's just been gnawing at me. What else has been happening? Like, how many thousands, or probably tens or hundreds of thousands of people have had similar kinds of experiences of being abused by authoritarian Russians coming in, taking over, trying to make sure that they're putting Ukrainians under the boot. And it's sad. It didn't have to happen. None of this had to happen, and it's happening. And if you are reading on Twitter and in the news and Facebook and whatever, people saying, just make peace with the Russians, just make peace. Let's just trade land for peace. No, this is what's happening. If you just make peace, they come back and they do this again. You can't just make peace with people that are going to sentence you to potentially years of your life in prison for a chewing gum wrapper. And it just doesn't make sense. You tell me, where am I wrong? What am I not seeing? Put it in the comments below. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.